brighten up those dark mornings. Wheeler, Ollie, and Lekter. Mornings at the Cabin.
Morning, everyone. Lekter, good morning.
Morning.
I take it all back.
What?
I've complained before on this show that...
You?
I know.
No.
Well, I realise I'm only ever going to be second place in the Mornings at the Cabin Complaining League, but I like to keep up appearances. I've complained before on this show that hockey in this town is not worth paying to see.
Ah.
I take that back.
Yes.
I went to the Challenge Cup yesterday. Stunning. One of the greatest sporting games I've seen in a long time.
Sounds like it was a thriller.
1 minute to go. St. Pat's boys leading Sir John Boyce by 4-2. And I started packing the camera away. I was like, well, this one's done. I don't need to worry. There's not going to be any more action here. This bunch of kids isn't going to come back or do anything.
Beat the traffic home.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to, I wanted to have everything packed up ready. I'll just nip out onto the ice, do a quick interview at the end, and then, jobs are good. Pack up, head home. 1 minute remaining. They get the third. 4-3. Like, well, come on, there's a minute left. 4 seconds remaining. 4-4. Pandemonium.
Wow.
Ripping the tripod back out of the bag. Camera back on the plate, back on the... telling you.
Cursing yourself for missing the tying goal.
I had it on a GoPro.
Oh, there you go.
Angle.
Okay.
Yeah, was there some sort of consolation? Anyway, videos on our website. We're going to talk about this some more this morning. What a game of hockey that was. 2 great games of hockey. St. Pat's won the girls' trophy. Sir John won the boys' trophy. Suddenly, I care about hockey in Yellowknife.
Mornings at the Cabin, the podcast.
Isn't it great when life inspires art? And there's nothing more reassuring in the day and age we live in to hear that Margaret Atwood is so inspired by the world around us that she's writing the sequel to The Handmaid's Tale.
People seem kind of terrified by this one, though. I don't know if it's always great when art imitates life, especially when you're like, well, we can see that happening, and it's not great for everyone.
Yeah, so the first one was written 33 years ago.
Yeah. As
a sort of, wouldn't it be terrible if the world was like this? And have you seen the show? I
haven't seen the show. I'm aware of what surrounds the show, but I haven't actually watched it yet.
It is pretty brutal.
Yeah.
I had a fairly hard time watching large chunks of it. I have watched it. Whether I would characterize it as enjoying it or not, I mean, television to me is usually, I've had a hard time watching even Game of Thrones sometimes.
I was going to say.
All right. Can we
you want brutal.
Can we just skip on, Yeah. Maybe we'll just assume that we know how the rest of this scene plays out. We don't have to see it.
But that's all never happening, right? That all happened, all that awful stuff, dragons.
Yeah.
All in the past.
We get it. We understand that guy had that guy in a room and some stuff occurred. Okay. And it was the same with Handmaid's Tale. It's just I watch television to escape and to not have to worry about all the things that I was already worrying about. I don't watch it to have new things added to the list of things that I was worrying about. And I realized that that's a very sheltered existence, and lucky old me. But even so. So Handmaid's Tale came along. It's like, oh, my Lord, all right. However, Margaret Atwood now going around for a second pass. Now she is 79.
Yeah. I would have assumed older, actually.
Yeah.
Had you asked me on the spot?
Born 1939. George R.R. Martin is the Game of Thrones author. He's 70.
Oh, and everyone's worried about that guy.
Right. I feel like everyone starts watching the clock as they get too invested in the story. They're like, well, how are we keeping Margaret Atwood alive?
Well, Margaret Atwood must feel pretty good about herself by comparison. She's like, well, I'm 9 years this guy's senior, and no one's worried about my health, so no. I must be doing pretty good for myself.
She announces she's coming back with a sequel. No one bats an eyelash. Meanwhile, George R.R. Martin's been at it for a decade now, trying to come up with a new one of these books. And there are people who are basically waiting with life support equipment outside his office.
It's been on the verge of death for 15 years now.
It's a way to keep your fan base engaged. Of course.
That's right.
Every morning, tweets by the million. You all right, George? George, talk to me, George. George, are you in there?
Oh my God, he's not answering.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's fine. He just had a meeting.
It's 3 a.m. where he is.
Yeah, he's sleeping. He's fine. He just, The pressure these guys must be under. I mean, Margaret Atwood sort of brought it on herself. She didn't need to do this. She decides 30 years later that the Trump administration is providing more than enough material for a world where crazed men subjugate everybody.
She's probably just so full of frustration and fury. She's like, well, what am I going to do? I have to write another book. I got to get this out.
Yeah, but if I was George R.R. Martin, I'd be crippled by a paralyzing fear of anyone ever reading another word I wrote, because now people have built up and up and up and up, and here comes the book, and they open the first page, and by the time, like, we know how this goes, by the time he's killed off 8 major characters in the first 15 pages, there'll be riots on the street.
Oh, yeah.
There'll be, if I were him, I would just be, I'd be stalling the clock.
I'd hand over the reins.
Yeah. Do that thing where some young up-and-coming author gets handed, like, that challenge, like the Bond books, I think, and there's some other, I forget which other books now, but I know there's various instances in which authors have been, like, the torch has been passed on, and now a series is being written by someone else.
Well, I guess the Harry Potter series has kind of gone that way with the whole Fantastic Beasts. It's
a little
not
bit.
Actually, I forget her name.
J.K. Rowling.
That's the one.
Yeah, it's all right.
The most famous author in the current day. I forget her name.
She's got decades left to go, so we're fine there, Harry Potter fans. But yeah, you're right. Like, so the torch being passed on, that's exactly what should happen. George R.R. Martin just toss that over and just be like, there you go, feed you to the wolves.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, there's no way you could write any more Game of Thrones and please even 50% of people.
He must just enjoy the power this brings him to have people hanging on his every breath, literally.
Imagine being the surgeon when George R.R. Martin is brought in. It's in your hands, Doc. Do everything you can.
Because I didn't feel enough pressure as a doctor.
500 million people outside surgery. Can you just get him to say what happens to Bran?
Cabin Radio's morning show podcast. All the best chat, none of the embarrassing mistakes.
It's not that I dislike hockey. It's that I dislike having to pay money to watch it in the Northwest Territories, where I can guarantee you the quality is unlikely to be sufficient to justify the cost.
Uh-huh.
And so yesterday, imagine my pleasant surprise to discover a free event that you can go to. Nobody wants anything from you. That happens to involve genuinely exciting hockey played in front of a capacity crowd.
And only 2/3 the length of a regular game.
2 periods. Challenge Cup, 2 periods. Now, you reacted with we had contrasting views of this situation. You were surprised.
I just never heard of that before. 2 periods rather than 3. I mean, I understand there's 2 games to be played. And we all got places to be. So I mean, I guess it's not unlike the NCAA. When it gets into the March Madness season, I think they play abbreviated basketball games.
Right.
So if it's going for like a kind of a tournament style atmosphere, even though it's just one game, I get it. But yeah, it surprised me. I never heard of that before.
I, on the other hand, was like, 2 periods of hockey. So what you're telling me is, like...
So 2 halves, like a regular sport.
So suddenly I understand. And now you're telling me I don't have to wait for, 3 periods always seems a bit much. Yeah, like, okay, we get it. Yeah, you're very good at skating. Well done. But, 3 periods, why is it an odd number? That's just... Because aren't you supposed to... Do you flip ends in hockey? Because they didn't do that yesterday, and it infuriated me.
Yeah, normally you do.
Right. Yesterday they kept the same end for each half of hockey.
This is madness.
And my skin crawled a little. I was like, why are the goalies at the same ends? This is not right.
Who organizes this tournament?
This is not how sport is done. and so that there was a little flutter of rage, but I got through it. But yeah, the whole odd number of periods. I mean, why? It's ridiculous. But anyway, we had 2 periods, and it was action packed. The girls' game 7-3 to St. Pat's. Sir John were never really particularly in that one.
Yeah,
but it was a good game to watch still. Sir John, even though they only scored 3 times, scored the better goals. But first goal from Sir John was just an absolute lightning rod from the blue line that hit about 7 people and went in. It's great to watch. I was right behind it. This is one of those great goals where if you score that goal, you just love every millisecond of that puck heading towards the net.
Totally intentional, too. Lined up all of those deflections.
Absolutely. Yeah. Math class has paid off for that student.
So I've scored 90% of my goals in my hockey career. Don't ever say you didn't plan it that way, kids.
Work the angles, everybody. Work the angles. And then second game, everybody loves a good last minute desperate comeback.
Absolutely.
And yeah, the whole, like, I was on the Sir John bench watching the communication around pulling the goalie, particularly entertaining. Because, it's a situation that I don't know. You know way more than I do. I imagine that teams, when you're a high school kid, don't necessarily often get into a situation where you are desperately pulling the goalie, and do you train for that? Like,
you don't necessarily train for it. You might have like a face-off situation set up where you have the extra person on the ice, and how to utilize that. But yeah, it's a situation you never hope to find yourself in, so you don't really plan for it.
Added pandemonium, right?
Yes.
The team that doesn't have the extra man now has to figure out. Yeah, everyone's looking at the bench like, they got more players than us. I don't know. Meanwhile, the team that has more players is looking at the bench. We've got more players than them. We don't know. Everybody's just slightly confused by this whole situation. And then the puck gets bundled into the net. The best part, though, was not that goal. That goal was enough. That got pandemonium. Everybody having amazing.
Right.
Like, 4.3 seconds left in the game. 4-4. We go into overtime. They score the winning goal, and it took like no time. It took a minute to get the winning goal because Sir John just had the momentum at that point. And the bench took like a solid 3 seconds to believe it. Because the goal went in, you could see the players on the ice, like way down the other end, celebrating in the corner. Arms up. And everybody on the bench was like, yay, right?
Can we get behind this yet?
Yay. And then eventually, after 3 or 4 seconds, everybody collected and was like, okay, yeah, we're good. Yay! Like, piled out onto the ice. But there was a solid 3 or 4 seconds of just not quite sure.
So honest.
Because you don't want to go early in front of like 800.
Of course, you want to go early. No, you want to sell it. You got to make the refs question their own decision. It's gotta be, in case they're not sure.
It's got to be super embarrassing when goal gets wiped out and everybody has to climb back over the boards. Meanwhile, like 400 kids from St. Pat's are all cheering.
But then it's the ref's fault, right?
Okay.
If you got all your helmets and gloves on the ice and you're celebrating and the ref decides to put a damper on everything and say, actually, I'm not sure that was a goal. Oh, that's a perfect excuse. The ref just blew a great moment.
I did look at the refs yesterday and think, you guys signed up for a pretty high-profile game here. Like this is not one to blow a call on when you've got the entire high school population of Yellowstone watching.
No. Great job on those highlights, by the way. And yeah, that bench shot is fantastic. You just, you feel the excitement and the drama. I will say, though, I will have to make sure that Nicole watches those highlights because one of my favorite new developments in my hockey watching life has been letting her know when a team has pulled its goalie. She hates it. She hates it when a team pulls the goalie because she's convinced that it never works out for the team who pulls the goalie that puts the extra person on the ice. She's convinced it's just the dumbest thing you could do. Never works out in their favor. Tried to convince her otherwise, but she's yet to see convincing evidence. Well, we've got some evidence.
Yeah, that's disappointing for you, Nicole. I mean, I used to feel exactly the same as her when I first came across that phenomenon. Because let me tell you what doesn't happen in soccer: you don't pull the goalie.
No,
right? Because that although I have seen before in the last game of the season, my team, Manchester City, my team that I support, I was at the game, and this is about 10, 15 years ago. The team urgently needed to at least tie the game to finish in like the top 6. I think it wasn't.
You always do a total goals
qualify
thing.
For European goals. There's all sorts going on, right? Like there was a lot going on, and they were trailing by 1 goal, and with about 20 minutes left, they didn't pull the goalie. They switched the goalie. So they took off one other guy, one outfield player.
Okay.
They took off like one of their forwards, put on a second goalie, and moved that goalie in goal and sent the other goalie in an outfield jersey up front to be a striker, to be a forward. On the grounds that the other team would never have seen this coming and wouldn't have a clue how to react.
Huh.
And it almost worked. Like the guy almost scored. It was like inches away from crossing the line. It was in the last minute of the game. It almost, if it had worked, it would have been seen as one of the greatest, most bizarre ploys of all time. Because the goalie's really tall.
Yeah.
And he's like a 6'5" guy. He'd never been seen playing outfield in like a 10, 15-year career. He played for England. He was an international star. And they put on the other goalie, sent that guy in goal and told him, like, go up front and just cause chaos. And yeah, nobody knew, like, what's he going to play like? What's he's like?
Right.
We've never seen this guy do anything other than be a goal. He is a goalie. Imagine the equivalent of, like, I don't know, name for me an NHL goalie.
Oh,
Anderson.
Pecorine.
Right? Yeah, Pecorine, right? Imagine, taking Pecorine and just being like, all right, Pekka, third period,
Yeah.
forward.
You're
right?
going up forward.
Yeah, you're center for the third period, right? And then lining up for the face. People just be like, is that Pekka? What? They're just looking at the coach, and the coach is like, yep, I got this.
Well, that would be grounds for immediate firing in the NHL.
Right? And it pretty much is in the Premier League, but it almost
worked.
worked.
Wow.
It was
Desperate times.
It was absolutely crazy. But yeah, Nicole, pulling the goalie, sad to say, worked a charm.
Mornings at the Cabin, the podcast, where we cut out all the great music and you're left with the rest.
We have brand new music, not only brand new music, but brand new Northwest Territories music right here in the studio right now, courtesy of Digga. Good morning, Digga.
Hey, thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for coming on and saying hello. So I am Ollie Lekter is in the studio as well. And we have you in the studio because you have a brand new album coming up. But not only do we have you, we also have Jan on the phone from, I believe, Denmark this morning. Where are you, Jan?
Hi, Ollie. Good morning. Yes, I'm in Denmark right now, in Copenhagen.
Okay, Jan, it's fantastic to have you on the show. Now, Jan, clear something up for me, first of all. Pronounce your last name for me.
De Vroede.
De Vroede.
It's exotic.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Yes.
So, Jan de Vroede is on the phone. And Digga, explain for us why we're chatting to Jan this morning.
Well, Jan, hey, how's it going, Jan? Long time no here.
I know. Nice to hear you, Digga.
Yeah, how's the weather in Denmark?
It's cold, but not as cold as Yellowstone. It's like -1 or something, so kind of summery for us, I guess, eh?
Oh, man, I wish I was there. Nice and warm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it's -11 here. It's fine.
Oh, yeah, it's nothing. It's T-shirt weather.
Holy cow.
So, Jan is, Digga, tell us a little bit more about Jan and what influence Jan's having on your new album here.
Yeah, for sure. Quite a few years ago, we had a chance to do a show in Vancouver a while back ago, and we started talking about working together on like an album, and lo and behold, like a year or so ago, we ended up in what was that town called? Jan?
That was just north of Aalborg, a tiny town called Hjortedal in Deer Valley.
Oh, interesting. We ended up in a barn, like in the middle of nowhere. Like, and Jan organized this 3 or 4 guys, like in the middle of the barn or like in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by fields, and we were there for 30 days without showers.
Wow.
Recording.
That is very true.
Yeah, recording like in the middle of nowhere. He got like an engineer and all the equipment like in a barn there, and we just set up and slept and ate right in like in a barn, surrounded by like a few farm cows. You know,
Got to have an audience.
Yeah, one of the musicians was riding into town, and he caused a stampede. If Jan remembers that.
It's true. It was kind of intense and awesome. I did not eat steak for a couple of days after that.
So this is not what I expect when someone tells me, oh yeah, there's a new album, Digga has a new album out. I don't expect it to involve a stampede and some cows and a barn in Europe.
Yeah.
So is that where everything came from? The album's called Yellowstone.
Yes.
And it's due out imminently. You're going to be able to find it in iTunes any moment now. We're going to play Yellowstone, the title track, in just a few minutes' time.
Yeah, the Yellowstone single is out. The full album is going to be out like in February.
Oh, okay. So the album's still to come. Single's coming out anytime now. And is that all coming from this time that you spent basically in the middle of nowhere, no showers, a few basics to eat, and in the company of cows?
Well, yeah, like it sounds like that, doesn't it? Jan had an idea that like I show up with the least amount of like songs and material, and we just show up in studio and see what happens and see where things go and stuff and whatnot. And like it was interesting because I tend to write like songs, complete songs before like I walk into studios, like everything from how the drums should sound like, how solos and bass lines, like everything written. But this was sort of like a small departure, and Jan was sort of like the engine of saying, you know, you can show up with nothing. Like I'm like, I can't show up with nothing.
Okay,
so I did show up with some nothings, but like, you know, it was a lot of fun.
I turn up every morning with plenty of nothing, and I wholeheartedly recommend it.
Yeah, my whole life is nothing.
So Jan, it sounds like you were encouraging Digga to take a few risks there. How did it work out? You know, we're going to play the song Yellowstone in just a few minutes here. Describe for people like what kind of sound are we going to get from this track and from the album?
Well, that's a tricky question because the album as a unity, as a whole package is rather diverse. It's also very unified. It definitely is an album, like an old-fashioned album, and every song goes together with the other material. But one of the goals we had was when I got to meet Digga and I listened to his songs and the band Digawolf and stuff, I was really blown away. I thought this is like by far one of the more amazing musics of the Canadian North Side ever encounter, not just on stage with the stage presence and the awesome guitar work and whatnot, but the whole personality and the storytelling and, you know, the thought that went into making music. So I just wanted to really work with Jesse, trying to see what would happen if we translated the intensity of what he normally does, but then combine it with like a more experimental approach. So maybe stepping away a bit from the purely, you know, guitar, drums, and bass rock format, and adding more vintage gear or broken toys, and basically just see if we can sonically map the storytelling and the presence that he has all on his own. So for me, the album has really turned out to be super successful in actually achieving that because, well, as Digga said, he showed up with a whole bunch of nothings, but it's not really nothing. It was like, you know, great ideas, great stories, poetry, ideas for riffs. And then basically we just improvised around that. We experimented on what you said about taking chances and risks. That's exactly what the whole point was, not to over-rehearse, not to hash it out beforehand, but really just see both spur of the moment and then, you know, very focusedly trying to make something that sounded both like Digga and a bit like me as well. So yeah, that's what we did. And for me, the single now, Yellowstone, is really a good example of that because it sounds recognizably like Digawolf, and then it doesn't either. It's something new, and I, for one, I'm really proud of it.
Digga, I'm watching you listening to that. Were you sort of immediately convinced that this was working when you got in there and you were sort of taking these extra risks? Did you hear what was being played? Did you hear yourself back and immediately think, "Yep, this is great"?
Well, when you walk into things like this, you sort of have to trust the guys that you work with, and I just met the guys, right? And I spent 30 days with them, and I have to trust a Jan that he knows what he's doing. And, you know, quite honestly, like whenever you're sort of in a new, unknown territory, you sort of have to reach out with your hand and say, you know, lead me or something like that, because it's dark and you don't know where you're going, right? So it's fun, as well, because you have no idea what's going to come out. And some of it you do, and some of it you're like, oh wow, maybe I should have listened to you because it probably would have been better, because you have a preconceived idea of yourself,
yeah, and
then you have your friends and fellow musicians who have a different conceived ideas of you, and there may be totally black and white, you see yourself as great while somebody sees you as like, a nothing and nobody, and so you have to trust people around you. And that's one of the hard things that I have about, like as far as myself, is trusting a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And Jan is one of a few people that I've, over the years, started trusting with my ideas in music. And Yellowstone is just one of those songs.
That's high praise for Jan. My last question for you is, Digga, you went out, you spent all this time in a barn to get the inspiration to put this together. When's Jan coming over, and when are you guys heading out into the bush for a month or two just to sort of hang out with some coyotes and basically just it's perfectly possible to go for a few weeks without a shower in the NWT as well. When are you going to show him the sights?
Well, let's just see what happens first. I think we got the cows in the barns out of the way. I think it's something else, yo.
Yeah, a bison.
Next time it's going to be elephants.
Elephants. Okay. Elephants we might struggle with. I feel like bison we can maybe do. A bison stampede. That'll keep you occupied.
Awesome.
Okay. Let's hear the track. Digga, just tell us a little bit about the track. Introduce it for us. Your album's coming out in February. This is Yellowstone.
This is a song I wrote like a while ago, and it's basically about love in the end of the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty much it.
I really want to hear it now. This is Yellowstone by Digga. Digga, thank you so much for coming in. The new single is out now. Jan, lovely to speak to you. Thank you for joining us all the way from Denmark this morning.
Cheers, Ollie, and really awesome to hear you, Digga. Congratulations.
Hey, cheers, Jan.
All right. This is Mornings at the Cabin. This is Digawolf, Yellowstone.
Prophecies come true. There's earthquakes and lightning. Still be loving you. Still be loving you. Still be loving you. Still be loving you. prophecies come true. With earthquakes and lightning, still be loving you. Yeah, I'll still be loving you. Yeah, I'll still be loving you. Still be loving you. Touch my soul, and I'm forever yours, and I will dream 1,000 moons to have that walk with you.
The Mornings at the Cabin podcast was recorded before a sort of live, thankfully not in the studio, audience.
An old friend has popped up on my screen in front of me. Fast becoming an old friend, anyway. I feel like we haven't known each other long, and yet I warm to this individual a little more with every passing week, because now the BBC has latched on to the phenomenon that is the individual, the animal, the thing that
The beast.
that I would call gritty, and that North Americans would call
Gritty.
gritty.
You don't say it gritty enough.
Well, that's gritty doesn't sound immediately in British English. This mascot sounds worse.
Yes.
Have you met Gritty?
Gritty.
Gritty? Hello, Gritty. Hello, children. My name is Gritty. It just doesn't. It doesn't really sound gritty enough. I see exactly what you mean. Gritty.
So Gritty's gone international now.
Gritty's gone international. For anyone who doesn't know, all three of you, this is the Philadelphia Flyers mascot. This sort of orange Jim Henson cast-off that insists on descending on a rope every now and again and slipping around the ice. And I enjoy him because I'm fascinated to learn how much this was by accident or design.
I think everyone would like to know more about that. Yeah, what inspired this nightmare of a design?
But the thing is, it's fast becoming beloved.
Yes.
And that's what I want to know. Is this by accident or design? Did they know? Because they must. You look at this, the initial negative feedback, because it is a monstrosity in several senses of the word.
Right.
There's very little to love initially about this mascot. They must have known that they were going to get this whole bunch of blowback. But did they know that this bland, anonymous they of a marketing department, did they know that this was going to come around?
You would almost think, that it has to be by design, because despite nobody really being able to pinpoint what Gritty is actually supposed to be, rather than, as you say, some kind of Jim Henson monstrosity.
Yeah. Orange generic monster is basically the best you can do, right?
Yeah. Yet perfectly embodies, and just the way you described it, perfectly embodies the Philadelphia Flyers as a hockey organization. There's nothing immediately likable about them, but something endures them to people.
Yeah.
Nobody really knows what it is. You can't really put your finger on it.
And it's turning into this PR masterstroke, because suddenly people see Gritty as just this Mr. Everyday, because not that great at his job.
The every mascot.
Yeah. It just isn't that great, right? It's just trying to get through the day. Can't stand up half the time, stuff backfires, but just keeps on plugging away. And people have started to identify with this thing, which is a triumph, which is exactly what you want. Which other mascots do you identify with? Yeah, like the Falcons from Sir John yesterday. They were great and all, but I didn't watch them come out on the ice and think, that's my buddy.
Right.
Yeah, but I look at this guy and blow me down. There I am, actively rooting for him to kind of half succeed.
What other mascot have you seen crash a wedding and it be not only a welcome surprise, but a planned surprise? You plan to have a hockey team's mascot show up at your wedding, And it's now a story on NHL.com. And just everywhere Gritty goes. Smiles and wonderful stories and viral stories seem to follow.
Honestly, I think it is an absolute masterstroke. And I think someone's probably getting a massive pay raise right now.
Hopefully.
Because they knew, I'm sure of this, I'm sure they knew that this was going to have an opening month that was going to be horrific.
Yes.
And then it was going to turn around. And if they actually knew that and someone had the gumption in that organization to commission it anyway and say, okay, yep, we see where this is going to go. We understand the long game.
Yes.
Good for them. Because it's rare that you get that kind of masterstroke at corporate level where people are like, what? 2 weeks of bad publicity in return for like 9 years of good? Ooh, no. I'm going to take that risk.
I feel like part of it had to come from so there was a hockey player. He actually just retired this past offseason named Scotty Hartnell. I don't know if you're familiar with the name.
I am familiar, but I wouldn't go any further than that.
He played with the Philadelphia Flyers. I don't know, maybe for about 5-6 years. He had a good run with the Flyers. Was a really popular player because he was. I feel like, once again, kind of embodied the Philadelphia Flyers and the Philadelphia public as a player. The way he played on the ice, it was, you could describe as gritty. He went into the dirty areas, as they're known. He'd bang and crash in the corners. He'd stand in front of the net and take punishment, but wouldn't, he'd give it all back. Very entertaining to watch. Not an ounce of grace in his game, but the kind of player you'd like to have on your team. And if you look at a picture of Scotty Hartnell from his Philadelphia Flyers days, it looks strikingly similar to what Gritty as a human being rather than a Jim Henson monstrosity may look like.
Wow.
I encourage you to look up Scott Hartnell on Google Images, specifically Scott Hartnell as a Philadelphia Flyer. He had this crazy orange hair sticking out. When they actually made the playoffs, he had the crazy orange beard to go along with it. It was as close as you were possibly going to get to Gritty.
Oh, there he is.
And I think he had to be the inspiration.
Oh, there he is. He looks like Mick Hucknall on steroids if you've ever watched Simply Red. Yeah, oh my, look at that. Yeah.
Is that not Gritty in human form?
It's absolutely identical.
Yeah.
There's one photo in particular where they are identical. They are. I understand everything now.
There you go.
Just one little postscript I want to add on to this. Soccer mascots, generally speaking, not as interesting as Gritty, although one Premier League team did come up with a relatively unique mascot for the start of this season, a couple of months back. They West Bromwich Albion, which is a team near Birmingham.
Okay. Take your word for it.
Yeah. Geography lesson there. Not sure why that was necessary. Anyway, they unveiled a new mascot. They'd signed a sponsorship deal with a home appliances company.
Okay.
And their mascot for the start of the season was a boiler on legs.
A boiler?
Like just basically a white appliance unit.
Right.
A small, it's called a combi boiler in the UK. It's a combination boiler and it runs like your heating and your hot water and stuff.
Okay.
And it was just one of those on legs.
So it's got a hot water heater running around
it was
the
like,
field.
imagine like a dishwasher sort of look. And it's just one of those just running around the field. It doesn't even have a head or eyes. They just used a small control panel at the front, I think, for the guy to be able to see through. But it just it looks exactly how I described it. It's not even like it was a cartoon take on a home appliance. It was just a home appliance.
That's awful.
Yeah. So you thought Gritty was bad. Imagine being a supporter of West Bromwich Albion and watching a boiler run out to launch your brand new season. Doesn't that fill you with hope?
Oh, how could it not?
Thanks for listening. Check out more from the show at cabinradio.ca.